You got the promotion. You finished the project everyone said was impossible. People you respect told you directly that you did good work. And somewhere inside you, almost immediately, a quiet voice said, "They don't know the whole story." I just got lucky this time. This isn't modesty. It isn't low self-esteem in some general sense. It's a specific cognitive mechanism that determines which evidence about yourself your mind is willing to accept and which evidence it quietly discards, no matter how strong or how repeated it is. Most explanations of imposter syndrome stop at naming it. They tell you it exists, list a few symptoms, suggest you celebrate your wins, or talk about it more. What they almost never explain is the actual reason proof doesn't work. Why you can accumulate years of competent, visible success and still feel, underneath all of it, like a fraud who hasn't been caught yet. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why your brain filters success differently than failure, why this filtering happens automatically and invisibly, and the specific shift required to make evidence actually count. Stay until the end, because the last part explains why intelligent, successful people are often more vulnerable to this pattern, not less. Let's start with the mechanism that almost no explanation of imposter syndrome actually names: asymmetric attribution. When something goes well, your mind has multiple possible explanations available: skill, effort, preparation, luck, timing, other people's contribution, the difficulty of the task being lower than it appeared. When something goes badly, the explanations narrow significantly, usually converging on one. This reflects something true about your actual ability. For most people without this pattern, attribution tends to be relatively balanced. Success and failure both get evaluated using a mix of internal and external explanations. But for someone experiencing imposter syndrome specifically, the attribution system operates with a consistent asymmetry. Success gets explained externally: luck, timing, other people, the task being easier than it looked, the evaluators being too generous. Failure gets explained internally: this confirms what I actually am, underneath the temporary cover of competence. This asymmetry is the actual engine behind why evidence doesn't work. It's not that you're not paying attention to your successes. It's that every success, the moment it occurs, gets automatically rerouted through an external cause filter before it ever reaches the part of your identity that's supposed to update. The success happened, gets acknowledged factually, and then gets explained away in the same mental motion, which means it never actually accumulates as evidence about your competence. It just gets filed as a fortunate event that happened to you, rather than something that came from you. Failure, meanwhile, bypasses that filter entirely. A single mistake, a single piece of negative feedback, a single moment of feeling unprepared gets processed directly, without the same layer of external explanation applied to it. This is why one critical comment can outweigh, in felt impact, 100 pieces of positive feedback. Not because the negative comment is objectively more significant, but because it's the only kind of evidence the system is actually built to accept without filtering it out first. Here's the part that explains why intelligent, capable people are often more susceptible to this pattern, not less. The more genuinely skilled you are at generating plausible alternative explanations, the more effective your filtering system becomes. A person with strong analytical ability can construct an entirely reasonable-sounding external explanation for almost any success. And because the explanation sounds reasonable, it doesn't feel like denial. It feels like accuracy. This is what makes the pattern so persistent in high-achieving people specifically. Their actual competence becomes the tool used to dismiss evidence of that competence. So where does this asymmetric filtering system come from? In most cases, it traces back to environments where competence was conditional or where mistakes received disproportionate attention compared to successes. If you grew up in a context where good performance was expected and therefore unremarked upon, simply the baseline, while mistakes drew sustained, focused attention, your developing mind learned an asymmetric lesson about which kind of evidence deserved deep processing. Success was normal, invisible, not worth dwelling on. Failure was significant, worth examining, worth remembering in detail. That early calibration doesn't require correction simply because circumstances change. A child who learned this pattern in a demanding household or a highly competitive academic environment often carries the exact same processing system into adult professional life, applying it automatically to every new piece of evidence, regardless of how genuinely different the current context is. There's a second factor that compounds this, particularly in adult professional settings. The specific, identifiable skills that got you somewhere often feel invisible to you precisely because they're now automatic. Early in any skill, you're acutely aware of effort and uncertainty. You can feel yourself learning, struggling, building competence consciously. Later, once a skill becomes integrated, it often stops feeling like skill at all. It simply feels like what the difficulty has been absorbed into automatic, unconscious processing. This creates a strange trap. The most competent you become at something, the less that competence registers consciously as competence, leaving a felt gap between what you're actually doing and what you believe you're capable of, even as the objective. Gap shrinks or disappears entirely. So how do you actually interrupt asymmetric attribution, given that it operates largely outside conscious awareness? First, deliberately apply the same attribution standard to success that you automatically apply to failure. When something goes well, instead of defaulting to "I got lucky" or "anyone could have done that," ask specifically what skill, preparation, or judgment was actually required. The same level of detailed, internal examination you'd naturally apply if the outcome had gone badly. This won't feel automatic at first. It requires conscious, deliberate counter-effort against a filtering system that's been running unexamined for years. Second, keep a specific, ongoing record of skill-based evidence, written down at the moment it occurs rather than relying on memory later. Memory itself is subject to the same asymmetric filtering. You'll naturally recall failures with more clarity and detail than successes, simply because that's what the system was built to retain. A written record bypasses that filtering after the fact, creating evidence that exists independent of how your memory chooses to weight it. Third, notice the specific phrases your mind uses to externalize success. "I got lucky," "they were just being nice," "anyone could have done this," and treat the appearance of those phrases as a signal worth examining, rather than accepting them as neutral, accurate descriptions. The frequency with which these phrases appear, specifically after genuine accomplishments, is itself diagnostic information about how active the filtering system currently is. Fourth, separate the feeling of fraudulence from the actual evidence available. The feeling itself is not unreliable information about your current emotional state. It's real, and it deserves acknowledgement. But it is unreliable information about your actual competence, precisely because it was generated by a system designed to discount the very evidence that would contradict it. Learning to hold both of these as true simultaneously. The feeling is real, and the feeling is not accurate evidence about your ability, is what eventually allows new information to actually reach the identity layer it's supposed to update. Here's what ties this together. You don't feel like a fraud because you secretly are one, hidden beneath years of evidence to the contrary. You feel like a fraud because you're running an asymmetric filtering system that was calibrated somewhere specific, applies automatically to every new piece of evidence, and was never designed to let success actually count as proof of anything. The competence was never the missing piece. The missing piece was a system willing to register it. If this explains something you've experienced despite real, visible success, tell us in the comments about a specific accomplishment you've never quite let yourself fully accept as evidence of your own ability. And if you want to keep uncovering the hidden mechanics behind your own mind, the next video is right there, waiting for you.